Anakin Skywalker's return has sent Star Wars fans into a meltdown, as he set out to finally complete Ahsoka's training. Honestly, strap in for this one because there's so much more to this lesson than meets the eye.
I'm here to finish your training.
However, like Ahsoka, many fans have yet to pick up on its true meaning.
You've learned nothing.
Don't say that.
We'll start off with what the lesson actually is, why she needs to know it now more than ever, and how it will completely change the character going forwards. Now this all begins and can be evidenced perfectly in the manner in which she lost to Baylan. She sensed a conflict within Sabine. Sabine wouldn't destroy the map, because then that destroys essentially any hope of finding Ezra, or so she believes. Which then leaves the door open for the enemies to bring Thrawn back into the galaxy. Now Ahsoka in this moment is likely feeling like she's failed Sabine, and in essence she actually has. And we'll get into why later on. Now Baylan took advantage of Ahsoka's thoughts in this moment and struck her down. Now Ahsoka awakens in the world between worlds where she's greeted by her old master Anakin Skywalker. The pair exchanged small talk and it wasn't awkward. Ahsoka doesn't actually reference Vader at all until a little bit later on, which we will touch on as it's a very important element to Ahsoka's lesson. And I know some of you did miss it on the first viewing. Now Anakin tells Ahsoka that he's here to complete her training. Now her training, I will say, hasn't officially been completed, but really she has learned most of what she needed to learn before she actually left the Jedi Order. And in her time away from the Jedi in the years afterwards, she's essentially filled in all of the gaps. Her lesson today with Anakin is actually something she had forgotten, that Anakin was there to reawaken within herself. Now Anakin tells Ahsoka the name of the lesson is Live or Die.
Or die.
And that is very convenient, but it's also ambiguous. It can have a lot of different meanings. And there are a ton of different theories going around at the moment on what this actually means. So with Anakin drawing his blade, and that stunned pretty much every Star Wars fan watching it, Ahsoka initially refused to fight him, and that's where he drops in the hint that this isn't a part of Ahsoka's imagination. This is actually Anakin in the Force communicating to her when he mentions that he'd heard that before, and of course that is referencing what Luke said to him in Return of the Jedi. Now, although Ahsoka is initially refusing to fight, Anakin knows exactly what's going on with his old Padawan and begins the training nonetheless. Now, to really understand the essence of what Anakin's trying to put through to Ahsoka here, you first need to understand her as a character. Now, the Ahsoka we got in this show is vastly different to the one we saw in the Clone Wars and Rebels, and there are some people on the internet doing what they do best, saying it's down to Rosario Dawson not being very good for the role, when it's completely not that whatsoever. In fact, what she's doing is perfect for Ahsoka at this point in time. This is exactly how Ahsoka is meant to be right now. And I would actually go as far as saying this, it's very reminiscent to the prequel era trilogy Jedi, who typically lack emotion and they have the whole philosophy of foregoing attachments and the rest of it. Now this is a stark contrast to Ahsoka as she was when she was younger. She was very much a character that was full of emotion in her young years, especially when she first met Anakin and throughout the Clone Wars. And it was her emotion that actually acted as one of her greatest strengths, just like it was also Anakin's. And there's no denying the two characters are very alike. That's why they got on so well. And it's exactly this that he wants Ahsoka to realise. The years have worn her down, they've taken their toll on her. Fighting during the Clone Wars, losing Anakin and the Jedi, fighting the Empire, now failing her own Padawan, failing to prevent Thrawn's return to the galaxy. This is all part of a life that she didn't anticipate nor want when she started her Jedi training. They were meant to be keepers of peace and justice, not soldiers, not warriors. Now Anakin begins her training by confronting her, trying to push her out of her shell. Now one of the reasons she lost herself over the years, yes, it was due to the fighting, the conflicts, but it was also because of Anakin's fall to the dark side. If she had stayed, would things have been different? Would she have been able to save him? Now the whole World Between Worlds part of the show was originally set to focus more on showing Ahsoka that she couldn't change fate itself, that things would have happened no matter what. Anakin would have always turned to the dark side, the Empire was always going to rise to power. Now they did change their approach slightly, and I'm actually quite glad they did. Rather than showing Ahsoka events would have always transpired one way or the other, they make her overcome them events rather than trying to get around them. They make her battle and fight through her own demons, and that essentially is the heart of what this lesson is about, although it did take Ahsoka a while to understand that. Anakin smashes the floor on the World Between Worlds and she goes falling down to the ground, where she wakes up during the Battle of Ryloth in the Clone Wars, and this was one of Anakin and Ahsoka's first missions together. Now she questions Anakin, why are we here? And Anakin probes her again. You tell me, have you got the lesson yet, Snips? Now the reason they're back down on Ryloth, we see her reliving an experience that shaped the person she would go on to become. A distant, detached Ahsoka afraid of her own feelings. Now, during the Battle of Ryloth, she made mistakes that cost the lives of many clone troopers. And of course, a younger Ahsoka did show that she cared deeply about the clones. And the guilt of that and many other losses over the years have continued to live deep inside of her. Anakin does give her a pep talk and told her even as Jedi they make mistakes. As Jedi they're meant to lead, but they also need to fight to survive. Now Ahsoka's going to need to lead and fight the impending threat of Thrawn and a reborn empire. If she shies away from the whole ordeal or doesn't fully commit herself to it, as she didn't her fight with Baylan, and buries her head in the sand, I'm sorry about that, Anakin, then she's already dead. Their enemies won't stop just because she has. Now they take us to the next flashback, which is arguably more important, and that is the Siege of Mandalore. But this, funnily enough, wasn't a battle that Anakin was present at, and that's because they've already parted ways and Anakin's well on his way to fall into the dark side, and I believe this is the reason why they've gone to this battle in particular. You see, Ahsoka blamed herself leaving the Jedi for Anakin's eventual fall to the dark side. What if she could have saved him? What if she was still around? And it was said in leaks that there was a whole flashback scene between Anakin and Ahsoka on Mustafar, which was meant to drill home the same lesson, but I think the Siege of Mandalore is a direct replacement for it. Over the years, Ahsoka has buried her thoughts and feelings deep inside of her, leading her to becoming more like the Jedi Order that she didn't want to be a part of, emotionless, detached, afraid to open herself up to feel the pain of loss, the anger that it all leads to. Now these are the very emotions that went on to turn Anakin to the dark side and so many others before and after him. And this is why she desperately tried to avoid them within herself. Trying to cut out the painful emotions has also in the process cut out the positive ones, which was a big part of Ahsoka's character. Unfortunately, these painful emotions do come naturally when you've suffered and lost as much as Ahsoka has, especially when she holds herself partially responsible for it. And it's at this moment on the Siege of Mandalore when she probes Anakin, calling him more powerful and more dangerous than anyone realised. And this is when Anakin realises she's missed the true lesson.
But more powerful and dangerous than anyone realized.
The whole reason he showed her Ryloth, to show what she used to be like. The whole reason he showed her the Siege of Mandalore, to show the reason that she's changed.
Is that what this is about?
Literally taking her back to a time when the darkness was growing within him, within the galaxy, and that is the same darkness that she's trying to run away from. This lesson isn't about reliving your most painful memories or perhaps getting closure that Anakin's now one with the Force. It's about saving herself from losing everything that made her who she is. Now it's time to switch it up a gear and Anakin transforms into Vader. Now he looks like he did in Revenge of the Sith, but this is a version of Vader that would have been around if he'd not lost to Obi-Wan on Mustafar. This is full powered Vader. They've tried exploring how Ahsoka used to be. We've seen the difference on screen between her younger self and her in the present time, and how much she's changed and how much she's lost out of fear of the dark side, out of fear of these painful emotions. But now she must confront it head on within Anakin.
Incorrect.
And I have to say, their whole fight here is dope, and it's one of my favourites within Star Wars, and it takes them back eventually into the world between worlds. Now I want to say here that Anakin has full control of everything right now, and he changes his lightsaber colour to red at will, along with his eyes. Effectively, it's like he's turning on his inner dark side, like you would flip a light switch. Which is pretty cool because it's now showing us after death that he has complete control over it. It's something he couldn't achieve whilst he was alive. And it shows us that perhaps once upon a time Vader and Anakin were very separate entities, they are now one on the other side. As their fight progresses, Ahsoka shows Anakin that she's willing to fight, not only him but herself. Although I believe this is the real Anakin, the two are so alike. Essentially, he's acting as a reflection of herself. And it's kind of like a scene we've seen before in Star Wars with Luke in the cave. Now it's upon seeing this determination to stand up and fight, he allows her to disarm him, take his lightsaber. She's shown him enough of what he wanted to see and she's now completed the lesson. She's shown to us when Ahsoka exposes her dark side briefly, when she pulls the saber closer to her eyes and her eyes turn to Sith yellow, that she's also able to demonstrate a level of control over it, like Anakin has now achieved. Now I do think if Anakin received a similar kind of training during a time that he was struggling with the dark side, perhaps things would have planned out differently for him. Perhaps he would have had more control whilst he was alive. But nonetheless, it's a lesson he's now been able to give Ahsoka, and it looks like she's actually achieved that, so she no longer has to be afraid of her feelings anymore. You can have these thoughts and these feelings, but don't give in to them. Instead, you have to fight through them. As Anakin said, to survive, you're going to have to fight, and fight she has. She's fought to live. It's fair to say Ahsoka now choosing to live means her true self effectively has been dead for quite a while, and she's just been walking around and operating as a shell of her former self. Whilst within herself, this training session presented her with the chance to survive or die, there's also a possibility that if Ahsoka chooses to die in this moment, and she ended up failing her final piece of training with Anakin, then she would have also died in the Sea of Satos, no longer willing to fight anymore. And I believe this is why on Ahsoka's return that she's now wearing the white outfit. She has become Ahsoka the White. And you'll notice as a character herself, she's behaving differently. She's not so reserved, rigid. She's more like her old self once more. She's showing more emotion, and she's taking chances she wouldn't have been willing to previously, and this can be seen when she decides to get inside the mouth of the Purgle and go to another galaxy, not knowing if she's going to end up where she needs to be. And this is all happening at a time where the galaxy arguably needs her more than ever. And I think this will also make her more capable of training Sabine, and I think she has been failing her up until now. She's afraid to pass on her wisdom and strength due to believing her part of the Jedi legacy is one of death and failure, and not wanting to pass that on to someone else. Let me know in the comments if you took away anything different from Anakin's lesson. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you're new, leave a like on today's video if you enjoyed it. I'll catch you in the next one. May the Force be with you.